All right, we're here. Welcome to Somm2Somm, formerly known as whatever that mouthful goes. We simplified it and made it a little more cutting edge, so hopefully you'll enjoy the new term. Same show, new guest. Like I said, Renaissance Somm, Courtney, how do you pronounce your last name?
Humiston.
Humiston. I know it's spelled, but Humiston.
Yes.
Okay, Courtney Humiston of Dry Creek Kitchen, decanter, Sommelier journal, all sorts of different valettes. You've got a lot of hats you wear and stay very busy.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, a lot
great.
going on.
So why don't we start off with your background and how you got here to this seat today at Somm2Somm, and just lead us into it.
Sure. Well, I drove my Mini Cooper from Healdsburg.
All right.
No, I
That's a nice
moved
drive.
out. It was a nice drive. I moved out to California in 2010 from New York City, and I studied at the Culinary Institute of America. So I kind of like fell in love with wine, and so came out to California to study. And so I went to the CIA and I did that program, and then I worked Harvest for 2 years for a couple of really interesting people, and did my certified somm exams. But I got into wine through writing, so it's kind of always kind of been about the writing for me. But now I work full-time as a wine director and work on the floor 5 nights a week. So I don't know how that happened.
So you kind of did it backwards from the way a lot of us do it. You know, most would go to the floor, would come up in restaurants or whatever, and that's the thing. And then you, as you build expertise, you do the writings. How did the writing thing take off for you? How'd that work?
The writing thing, yeah. So I mean, as a writer, like I worked in restaurants a lot.
All right.
Because that's how you make a living as a writer, is you work in restaurants. And so that it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. Like I was very familiar with what happens there. And the writing thing happened. So one of my freelance jobs when I was living in the city was for NBC New York. So I was working as like a freelance reporter, doing like stories for their website. And it just so happened that a lot of wine bars were opening in my neighborhood. So I was like talking to somms and talking to professionals and drinking really interesting wine and learning about amphora and talking about, you know, trying to investigate what was happening in the wine. And so then you just, you know, here I am.
How did you get hooked up with like Decanter and the Sommelier Journal and all the publications you work with?
Like just talking to a lot of people, you know. I think it comes down to being in the right place at the right time a lot of times. But the wine industry is so incredible because people just like throw their arms open to you, and like everyone is just so eager to share and teach and give you opportunities. Whereas like working in publishing in New York City it almost was just the opposite, you know. Yeah, but the decanter thing, how did that happen? Oh, I got a fellowship to the Wine Writers Symposium at Meadowood, so I had written some stories, and they were really kind and gave me the scholarship, and so I was able to go, and the editor, Adam Leshmere from Decanter, was there, and so I started writing for him, and that was just a really great experience, kind of doing more like news, like hardcore, like news stories.
So what are some things you've written about for, I mean, I've been keeping track of some of your trips that you go off on and write about. Tell our viewers some of the topics that you've written some stories about.
Yeah, no, I did a story for Somm Journal last year about sake, so I got to go visit these sake breweries and learn about, you know, the magic mold and spend time in sake breweries, which was so fascinating.
That had to have been cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah.
Sake is one of my pet things. I love Eduardo's show, Sake Drinker and Friends, and I'm not really that into sake, but I really enjoy it. I like not knowing much about it.
It's fascinating because it's like such a detail-oriented process, and it's such like what I love about wine is the terroir, right? Like the idea that this place and this soil and these people like came together to make this. Well, I mean, this wine is actually a perfect example of that. And it couldn't come from anywhere else, you know. And sake is such an extension of the Japanese culture, I think, and so it is like it's a very terroir-driven product.
Well, it certainly pushes the same buttons: the mold, the rice, the water, the process, everything. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. It doesn't look like it'd be much fun to do. I don't know, making sake. It looks like a lot of.
Oh, sake breweries are actually. It's really strange that now we're just talking about sake, but sake breweries are so beautiful. Like they're so quiet. They smell amazing. And everyone's just very like, there's like a reverence around it, and there's like so much ceremony and so many steps in the process, and you know, you put these booties on if you go into this room, and you know, the place where the koji happens, where like the mold actually infects the rice, is like it is like a sacred place, and so only certain people are allowed to go in there, and it's just like the best smelling sauna you can imagine. So yeah, it was cool.
Sounds like it really plays to the wine geek stuff that we all really get into, as far as the minutiae and the details and the things that make you just obsess about things. And it's one of the topics we were talking about before was those are the kind of things that get people excited about wine. And you know, when you're on the floor and talking to people, it's not really about demystifying it, it's about mystifying it and getting that story and getting that specialness across to the people.
It is, absolutely. And one thing that I don't do anymore is I never ask people what they like. And that may sound strange, but I'm more interested. I mean, the wine has to be good, first of all. Scott Brenner, who I worked with at Press, taught me that, because I was always like telling him stories about wine, and he's like, Courtney, the wine has to be good.
Of course.
And so the wine has to be good, but more importantly, I think that the reason that I love what I do is it's about that discovery, and I think it's about challenging people a little bit. And like I can just give you what you want. I can give you Paul Hobbs Pinot Noir like every night of the week, and be like, oh, it's delicious. But it's really about having a discovery, and I think that's what makes life interesting in general, and maybe what I'm attracted to in wine.
Totally, and there's no finish line. There's always new stuff.
Always.
So now you go from writing about all around the world and all these adventures, things and stuff, and now you have an all Sonoma list.
Yes, this is true.
So I'm sure that's great in some ways, and it's confining, like, you know, what are the pluses and minuses, the fun things about it and the drawbacks?
Lots of fun things. More pluses than minuses, I think. So I remember when I first was interviewing for this position at the Dry Creek Kitchen, which for 13 years has always had an all Sonoma County wine list. I was watching one of David Chang's shows, and he was interviewing the chef in Scandinavia who only sources within like something ridiculous, like 5 miles of his restaurant, right? So he does a lot of foraging, and he's out there like, you know, picking up little green things and putting them on plates. And his quote was, you know, having limitations, it forces you to be creative. So I really embraced that, and I think we have a really solid wine list right now. So a couple of things that I did while I was there is focused on single vineyard wines and really trying to find those sort of like, you know, Grand Cru, Pinot and Chard vineyards, but then also digging really deep and find out what else is growing and what other people are doing and making. And, you know, and we have a lot of wines on our list that maybe someone made like 1 barrel or 2 barrels. Mm-hmm. And so it's about that discovery, and it's about digging really deep and just thinking outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, I was recently over there on a tour around Russian River. We went to a lot of Chris Donatello single vineyard places, and it was fascinating within the Russian River, the difference between Sebastopol Hills and Laguna and the Western Bench and all the different sub areas from ridge to ridge was different. And so what do you, as an expert in Sonoma wine, obviously because you live and breathe it all day long, what are some of the places that are really special, those Grand Cru sites that stick out to you?
I love the Charles Heinz vineyard. It's out in Occidental. And Charles Heinz, whose family has been farming there for, I don't know, a few generations. They used to farm apples there, and then he planted Chardonnay in the 70s, I want to say. Mm-hmm. And he says it's like trying to grow grapes in a rain cloud because it's so foggy. And Radio Coteau his estate, his Infandel vineyard is right across the street, and it's a really special place. But it's special because the wines tell you that it's special, you know. So you taste so many different wines from the Charles Heinz vineyard, and you're like, oh wow, this is a special place.
Right.
It's pretty cool. So I have like 5 or 6 wines from that vineyard on my list, and I love Chardonnays.
Yeah, we were just at Riddle down the road from there.
Yeah.
Actually, not too far, same ridge. Beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah.
But then that compared to like where Porter Creek is, couldn't be more different.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, that's the appellation. The system is all screwed up. But if you just look at the single vineyards, you know, it's more specific.
So how do you arrange your list? Obviously, Sonoma County, you got a lot of Pinot and Chardonnay. Is there a way that you organize it so that you can maybe separate these areas, or how do you help your guests?
I don't anymore. It used to be organized by appellation, but I find that most consumers are shopping based on producer. And so even though I went to Burgundy and I would just love to organize a wine list by the vineyards, it doesn't make sense in California. So it's still producer first. So it's just it's grape variety and then alphabetical.
You even thought about soil type or anything?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, our wine list is organized by soil type.
These are the Gold Ridge ones, and these are the Franciscan wines. And
that would be a lot of fun.
That'd be a lot of fun. You'd have a lot of puzzled, you know, all the tourists that come to town. Oh.
Yeah, sometimes some wine lists feel like that. It's like they're trying to stump their guests, but no, ours is pretty straightforward.
So now beyond Pinot and Chardonnay, what are some other cool things that you're doing in Sonoma that people might not know about as much?
So many things.
Our people out there in Somm land should know about.
Yeah, so many things. I mean, Somms love to geek out about unusual grape varieties, but there really are a lot of tiny plots of things that were planted, and what I'm seeing a lot of young winemakers do, you know, winemakers who have a day job, but then they're making a little bit of their own wine. What's really interesting to me is that they're finding these grape varieties and then they're farming them in a way that they can be made into a single wine, whereas before they were probably going into some innocuous blend. So I love this just sense of like, it's just so it takes so much legwork, like literally walking around vineyards and trying to find those special places, you know, that Nebbiolo, those 4 rows of Nebbiolo that's just been sort of neglected, not farmed properly from Nebbiolo, and then taking the farming into their own hands. And it's just, I don't know, it really inspires me.
It is crazy, the history of Sonoma with all the different immigrant groups and everything, that they've brought a little bit of everything along, and you've got all that. I imagine you have a great platform being the destination Sonoma restaurant to get to know all these small persons. They all come to you, so. Yeah,
I hope so. I mean, I like to think that Dry Creek Kitchen can be sort of like a place where you can showcase what you do.
So what's like a weird, fun thing you're playing with now?
Well, I really like, you're just kind of catching me. It's like asking what your favorite book is or something. But I love Calvin Kelly's wines, and so he has the skin fermented Pinot Gris from the Windsor Oaks vineyard that's awesome. And Pax Mall makes a Trousseau Gris from that same vineyard, and Scott Schultz for his Jolie Lay label makes Pinot Gris and Trousseau Gris from that vineyard as well. So
I just had a Wind Gap Blaufränkisch yesterday. That was interesting.
Nice.
Didn't know there was any Blaufränkisch over there, but that was pretty cool.
See, you just taught me something. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, ask Pax next time you see him.
I will.
Do you get a lot of winemakers that come through a lot and all that? And
a lot, yeah. I mean, that's like one of the benefits, I think, of being a somm in one country is you get to talk to winemakers every day. And so I learn a lot about the production side. But for me, it's about, you know, like I used to just, when I tasted with winemakers, like, it, like this guy, you know, like he made this wine and his cork says, I grow it, I make it. And so, like, you know, if someone like that brings that wine into you and you're tasting it with them, you would never say anything, you know, you would never say anything bad about it, obviously, because like they made this wine. But I've learned more and more to be like super, super honest about what you're tasting in the wine. And, you know, like just tell the truth.
And also, I mean, Peter Math is such a super nice guy.
Of course, yeah. But you do have to be honest. And like my friends who make wine and they bring a wine to me and I'm like, like here's what I'm tasting, you know? Like it's not a judgment, it's not a criticism, but here's what's going on for me. Like, can you please explain that? And then the tasting becomes a learning opportunity. And I had a white wine, kind of an unusual grape variety by the glass last summer, and that was made by this guy that I really like. And I said, you know, dude, like it's already an unusual grape variety and the wine's really cloudy because he didn't filter it and it was just really cloudy and like milky. And so you already have like this grape variety that no one in California like knows, and then you pour it for them and then it's cloudy. And so it's kind of like, it's like a turn up. I'm not going to say what it is, but at that point though, the naturalness of the wine actually distracts from enjoying the wine. And so I said, you know, just a light filter, like just make it, like clean it up a little bit. And they did. They filtered the next vintage, and it seems more pure and more focused, and it's easier to get guests to buy that wine. So sometimes, you know, when you're working as a sommelier, I think it's important to call winemakers out on their bullshit.
I always found it. Well, yeah, I always found it was great to give honest feedback because you know, if you just tell them it's wonderful, they keep making flawed wine, and you know, they're wondering why doesn't it sell? Everybody likes it.
Well, and for your own development, I mean, it's an opportunity because you know, this person has been with those grapes since before they were grapes, and so you can have a really good conversation about how it got to that point.
Well, and the other thing is having a broad background. You know what it's supposed to be in the world of wine.
Yeah.
If you have a Blaufränkisch and you're knowledgeable about all wine, you should know what a Blaufränkisch is like, and then say compare this to Austria and see how it goes. Yeah. Which brings us back to like a little bit touching on that kind of cool kids thing and the IPOB thing. Did you go down there last week? And what did you notice from, I guess the big topic was John Bonnet giving his speech and,
oh my goodness,
you know, the reaction amongst the sommelier community. What was that like being there?
It was fun. There was a lot of energy in the room, and I almost wonder if John Bonnet's whole point in writing that article was just to start a conversation and start a dialogue, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that happened. Certainly he left town with everyone's talking about him, so.
So what was your take on it?
My take on the article? Or,
yeah, sure. The whole, you know.
The whole hullabaloo.
Fiasco, whatever you want to call it, you know.
Yeah, I like that it was a conversation, and I think that a reporter's job is to draw attention to things that seem important. And I think one of his poorly made points was that restaurants are not investing enough in their wine programs and in their wine professionals and in their somms, and John cares, you know, and he's been observing this for years, and I have a lot of respect for his experience. But I think the point that didn't come across maybe as loud and clear as it should was just that, like, as an industry, we need to be, as a hospitality industry, not as a wine industry, as a hospitality industry, we need to invest in our wine programs, at least.
Totally, absolutely. There's so many eager somms out there in the classes doing the certification, and there aren't that many spots. You know, there aren't the teams of. I think that's what he was talking about, was the teams of sommeliers, like back when Larry Stone was running it and had his, you know, whole minions around him. It's not so much that, it's one person, one program trying to make it all work, and then they're stretching them a little thinner so they're not just doing wine.
But I don't think that John was criticizing sommeliers, and I think that got lost. You know, I think a lot of somms felt, because, you know, you work so hard in this industry and you do it because you love it. Like, the work has to be its own reward, right? And I think a lot of somms were like, kind of took it personally, but I don't think that was what he meant to do. I think it was more of a criticism of not investing in our wine programs and investing in our somms. I mean, there's more talented people working in the wine industry than ever before, and that means that the world of wine is just going to continue to improve. And we should feel really good about that, but it's a lot of work, and there aren't a lot of jobs, and the wine programs will suffer because of that, unfortunately.
Well, I think a lot of it's movement to more casual lists, smaller lists, more dynamic lists.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I would not be critical of smaller lists or more casual service, but I would be critical of a restaurant saying, oh, our GM can do the wine buying, you know, because being a wine director is not going through a catalog and like picking out wines, you know. It should be an extension of the personality of the chef, of the somm, of the restaurant, of the type of guests that you're serving, and that's like thinking about those things as a full-time job, you know. And then most wine directors, like me, are working on the floor 5 nights a week, so you know it can turn into a 14-hour day. Very
that's
easily.
a good thing though, because there's no point putting wine on the list, and I think that was part of his argument was. You put all these obscure wines on the list, and then there's no one there to sell the wines.
Yeah, it's
you know,
so
at least
true.
if you have somebody on the floor touching tables and making sure the wine goes out the door, that's a big difference than, oh, look at all these cool wines that I just threw on the list, and no one knows what they are.
I know.
Yeah.
No one's gonna sell your skin fermented Rebol de Gial for you.
Not unless you take it out there. I've inherited a lot of programs where it's like, okay, yeah, great, somebody fell in love with that. What are we gonna do with it?
No, you gotta know it, and I love it. Like, I wouldn't want it any other way. Like, I just did a wine list for a new restaurant that opened in Healdsburg. And
Valette, if you haven't heard about it, it's the hot new place in Healdsburg. Yeah, it's
a lot of fun. Really good people. It was our executive chef. He left and opened a restaurant right across the plaza, which has been funny. But great people. Like, it's such a labor of love for them, and so I was really excited to be a part of it. And it's been a lot of fun. But it's so different because I'm not working there every night. You know, so I do the wine buying, and I come in and check on things but it's so, you feel so detached from it. So
that leads us to another thing that we cover a lot on the show is, what are some techniques you have for training the staff to make sure that these wines get sold, even when you're not there? I mean, because a great program, especially if you travel like you do, and it can't just fall apart when you're not there to find the wine. Yes,
that's true. I don't know. I haven't figured it out because I'm so hands-on. But with Valette, first of all, you have to have a great team of servers, and I'm lucky because I work with really amazing people who could all be somms. I mean, 2 of them are actually studying for their certified, but they all love wine and they know wine, and making your servers a part of the process, of the buying process, is really important. On the weekends, on Friday and Saturday nights, I try to always just open a random bottle. It's on the bottle list, but I just open it, and we'll kind of sell it by the glass or put it on the tasting menu. But more importantly, and most importantly, is just getting your servers excited about it and letting them taste something interesting. And it makes we're in a unique position as somms to make the lives of our servers much better, I think, because you can make it fun. You know, you can open something interesting and be like, okay, I know table 23, like, they were assholes, but, like, you know, taste this. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, they're excited again.
It's true. I mean, there's nothing like the ability of a somm on the floor to make things easier.
Yeah.
The kitchen's melting down, you go do your song and dance in front of the table and tell them a story or two. They don't realize that their entrees are 10 minutes late.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
That's a big part of the job. But a big part of my job too, and I think I've realized this only recently, because this, you know, the somm thing is kind of new to me. You know, I've really only been in the wine industry for 5 years and working, you know, as a sommelier for a couple years. So I'm only just now realizing that, like, if you can invest in your servers and invest in your team and try to make it a really fun environment, like, everybody wins. Your guests win because people feel happier and they're bringing a smile to the table. And, you know, even if, like, your server's smiling because, you know, they're making fun of you, like, the guest doesn't know that, right? So.
Well, I think that's something that Lindsay covered last month in the show, was a lot of the manager role, or even as beverage director, is taking care and treating your staff as guests so that they can go out and be better towards their guests.
Absolutely. Life is hospitality, and, you know, I try really hard to bring that to work and say hello to every busboy and busgirl and you know, thank the chefs at the end of the night. And, you know, I'm not perfect at it, but I try. So.
And we all have our nights, you know, yeah. I mean, for me, I remember it was always like the curtain would draw during service, and I would be like,
yeah, that happens.
You know,
for sure.
you're like, put your tie on, tighten up your tie, and focus. And I'm like a totally different person than at the end of the shift. Oh, we got a question here. All right. Hey, okay. So, okay, cool. This is from Gregory C. Who I might know. I'll abbreviate it. So, who are your sommelier mentors, and who are some people you look up to?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an important question. So I trained at the Culinary Institute. So Christy Dufault and Bob Bath were my 2 full-time instructors. So those 2 people for sure have just changed my life, and I love them so much. Then I worked hardest for Abe Schoner, and so Scullion Project. And I knew his wines from New York, and actually his wines were some of the wines that inspired me to get into wine, because they were just so weird, you know?
Yeah, you know, some weird wines, that's for sure, yeah.
Yeah, but they were so like weird in a very good way, to me at least, because it just didn't taste like fermented fruit juice, and I felt like, I mean, like I have an English background, right? So I love poetry and, like, you know, these sort of like more metaphysical approaches, and to me, like, his wines taught me a lot. So I worked hardest for him, so of course him, and then Scott Brenner and Kelly White at Press Restaurant. I worked as a server and as their assistant sommelier for a year and a half, and learned so much about like the logistics of serving wine at a table, and being professional, and just, well, you know, life as a somm.
I'm sure all that Napa knowledge is really useful now over across the mountains in Healdsburg.
Yes and no. So, I mean, terroir is a funny thing, right? Because you learn about a place through the grape, but the grape is really just the vessel, right? So in Napa, it happened to be Cabernet Sauvignon. Where I am now, it's many different varieties. Zinfandel even, you know, I mean, field blends.
Definitely.
You know, I learned so much about terroir from the wines of Joel Peterson. We tasted some older Ravenswood from the 90s. And I mean, these are single vineyard wines. Like, these are wines that are about place.
Sure, Old Hill and those.
Absolutely,
Old
Hill for sure, Monte Rosso. Really interesting.
Just up the hill from this guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. His vineyard is it's beautiful. It's right there in that slope. Got another question?
I do. Hi, I'm Carl Tiedemann, and I write a wine blog called Tiedemann on Wines. And first, Courtney, let me say that you're to be commended for taking a big chunk of time out of your life to get certified and become a registered somm, and I think that's really great. And I'm frankly jealous as can be, but I'm too old to take that position in my life.
Oh, no.
Here are 2 questions, and these are sort of server questions.
Okay.
The first is there sort of a guideline when you take over for the server and talk about wine? For example, I've been in a restaurant, and I'll discuss wine, and if I say, geez, you know, well, let's just use dollars and cents. If I want to buy a $60 or $70 bottle of wine in a restaurant, the server will generally help me. It's been my experience that if I say I want to buy a $200 bottle of wine in a restaurant, the somm will come and help me. Do you have a guideline, or is there a rule of thumb, or how does the customer get handed off from the server to the somm?
$61.
$61. Yeah. Perfect. I'll remember
as soon as you get above the second lowest wine, and then
no, it's a good question. Yes, absolutely. It's something I think about a lot on the floor, because I would never want to disrespect my server by like jumping in, you know, because they're totally capable of selling wine, and they have their favorites for sure. They ask me would be the #1 thing. I'm also eavesdropping, so I like to think, and I don't always succeed, but I like to think that I know what's happening at every table in the dining room during service. And yeah, I mean, I will totally spend, you know, if I have 15 minutes to talk about selling 1 glass of wine, that's going to be that glass of wine that's going to make that person's dinner. That's worthwhile time spent. It's not just about the money. It's about creating that experience and helping someone discover a wine. And if it's a glass of wine, and if it's an $18 glass of wine, and I can have the time to talk to that table about it, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have the misconception that sommeliers are out there to get more money out of the guests, and that's never been my goal or any real somm worth their salt that I know. It's about getting the right bottle, and you want to find the right wine for that guest, no matter what it is. Sometimes you miss on the low side, and people get upset because you didn't take them
enough.
take them to the deep end, and then sometimes it's just a a little bottle of rosé that's the perfect wine for them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter really how much it is. It's to get to that right point.
It helps because ultimately your servers are going to make more money if you sell a more expensive wine. But like my favorite section on my wine list is the interesting white section. Like that's my baby. I love it. And those are like the most affordable wines on the list, So I get like most excited about like this $36 bottle of Tokay Friulano,
That sort of leads me into my next question is, how do you respond to the question, what is the best wine to go with this food? Do you have a go-to wine? You just mentioned that your baby is the white section.
Yeah.
I mean, do somms have this? Well,
yeah, it's called champagne.
There you go. There you go. Champagne, Riesling, rosé.
Yeah, go-to. The food and wine thing is interesting. I'm not the right person to talk to that. To me, it's all about the wine, and then like the food is just so that you can keep drinking. But don't tell the chef I said that. In fact,
same way.
But, anyway, no, yeah, sparkling wine for sure. Like that's a go-to. But yeah, nice crisp whites always. I recently paired a 2007 Chardonnay with our duck dish. And everyone was like, really? Like, does that actually work? But when you look at what else is going on the plate. It did work, and it was fun when someone is like, oh, I don't know if that's gonna work, but I'm all about that. I'm like, oh yeah, and maybe for you it doesn't, but it's like about the conversation and the dialogue, and it's about paying attention to
absolutely
the food and wine. So.
I think a couple things that people miscalculate on that somms think about is the preparation, like you said, the set. How is that dish prepared? The cooking technique on the chicken, for example. Boiled chicken is different than roast chicken versus spicy chicken or fried chicken, and it's just chicken, but the way it's made changes it. Yeah. But you can't take your guests too far. You have to stay within their parameters.
Yeah, you can take them pretty far.
Sometimes you have a tasting menu, you can do it, but you also want to keep that in mind. So it's a big moving picture.
One last question, and that is, how do you feel about tasting the wine before the customer does? Do you do that?
That's not our standard practice at this restaurant. It was when I worked at Press, because we did serve a lot of older bottles there, and so the somm always tasted the wine before the guest. I wish we did, honestly, because I have definitely served corked wine to a table and just been like, because you smell the cork and you're like, something's going on, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, but if you even question it for 1 second, it's worth it just to go back and be like, you know what? When I poured that wine in your glass, I thought I got a little something, and you can't serve bad wine to people, so.
Yeah, you don't want to have that conversation.
Yeah, but
I think it might be a little quirk because they're going to say, yes, it is.
And that's fine. I would rather take a chance and be wrong and then sell that wine by the glass or something than risk someone having to drink a corked wine with their dinner and not know it and then just think like, I had this kind of shitty wine, That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the goal for me I've always said my job was to make my chef look good. It's pretty much, you get in defensive mode and then you get in aggressive mode, but yeah.
We won't go there.
Well, I don't mean that. I mean, people tend to get into train wreck situations, and you're trying to say, okay, hold off a second.
It's about mutual respect, and it's about respecting what your chef does, and it's about your chef respecting what you do, and it's about having really fun conversations about food and wine and what your mouth is tasting and what's going on.
Okay, great. So let's see. What are you working on writing-wise? You got anything coming up?
I don't really, because I just did this wine program. No, I really don't have. I'm not working on anything right now.
Okay. Yeah. So what are some things, besides your Sonoma focus? What keeps you based? What keeps you grounded? Staying in touch and.
No one's ever accused me of being grounded.
That's right. We were talking about staying sane and all these things, and but you've got a lot on your plate. How do you balance it all? How do you keep it all together?
Barely, I guess would be the answer. It's like put everything into your calendar. Like everything at that exact moment when it happens, otherwise you will forget about it, and just love what you do,
Yeah, I mean, time management is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not the best person at it, but.
Oh, we got another one here. It's shrunk. Oh, okay. So here we go. What about some other programs? Let's put some people on the spot. Who are some programs that you like and you think are cool?
Oh,
either
absolutely.
in Healdsburg or elsewhere.
Yeah, my friend Lulu McAllister, she's down at NOPA. She's just killing it. She's an awesome wine list. It's a fun place.
Absolutely.
I love to discover things, and I was there. I had dinner there a couple nights ago, and I discovered a new grape variety that grew in the Loire Valley, and I was like, "What? I've never heard of this." And
Which one was that?
It was Roma Rentin. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, Courcheverny.
Yeah, exactly. And it was so awesome, and it was just a fun discovery. So I love it when that
You'll get familiar with that when you get into the advanced study and all that stuff. But
sure.
Actually, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the CIA. I mean, Bob and Chris, you're great.
Yep.
But that's a program that, we talk about certification programs. We talk about the court. We talk about WACT. We talk about Society of Wine Educators. But that's one because it's out here. You don't hear as much about it. Tell us a little bit about what you get out of that program.
For me, everything. It was just really, it's a great program. It's not for everyone. It's a very formal study. I mean, you're in the classrooms from 7:30 until 2:30. It's very rigorous and it's very expensive. And so it's not something that everyone would need to do. But for me, getting into the wine industry at 29, and being raised Mormon, by the way, so I didn't grow up around wine at all.
Wow, all right.
So, I felt like I needed to be immersed very deeply, very quickly. And it was good for that.
So you would say somebody that really wants to dive in head first and get that.
Yeah, if you're making a career change, if you're just sort of like that, if you like studying, if you haven't grown up around wine, but you know that you love it, it's a great program for that. But it's also very small. I mean, there are only 14 people in my class, so it's not like studying with a W set or something.
Is that only out here, or do they do that back in New York also?
Only here.
Only here.
Yeah.
So yeah, very small. Yeah. Well, cool. That's
Yeah.
great. Now's the time when we go through the wines for everybody watching at home, trying to figure out what are they drinking. We talked about a couple of them. The one that we keep draining is the Domaine Martin Saint-Véran, little white Burgundy made by two brothers in just outside of the town of Puy-Foussay. The Mathis, I grow it, I make it, Sonoma Valley Grenache Rosé. That stuff is just it must come in a 700 milliliter bottle because it's empty all the time. And then we decided to diversify a little bit since you're Sonoma. We got one Sonoma wine and a little bit of Hewitson Miss Harry's GSM blend from Barossa Valley in Australia. And finally, the Casalos de Chianti Classico Reserva Don Vincenzo from a great little family producer in Chianti. So if you find those out there, enjoy them, put them on your list, and have fun. So
Cool.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And
Cheers.
another great show.
Yep.
Thank you. So the bonus round.
The
That's
bonus
very cool.
round. Dun, dun,
All right.
dun.
And you are live.
And we're back for the bonus round.
Bonus round.
People couldn't get enough, so we've got some questions, and like we said, just pull the string on us and let go, and we'll just talk and fill time. So fire away. What do we have?
Now Didier has to bring him up here.
All right, so now we got to pull the string and
Come
talk about
on,
stuff.
Didier,
So,
come on down.
Gotta be fussy.
so what was your favorite wine at IPOB?
Or something?
Just, I will
I can't answer that question because it's just
Too political?
It's too political.
Was there anything new that excited you, or?
Well, I hadn't had Gavin Shannon's wines very much before, so that was
Really
for me
good,
a personal
yeah.
discovery. Because I don't do Santa Barbara, and so
Sure.
I hadn't had them before, and they're just killer. They're really good.
They are. He's a super nice guy
Chardonnay
too.
too, is just so
Yeah,
focused.
they're
and
great.
delicious. Yeah.
Thomas de Bies.
All right. So here we go. As wine writer, I'd be interested to hear your opinion on the current state of wine criticism. Do you feel that the 100-point scale is helpful in the long run to the consumer, or does it rob them of the diversity of style the great varieties and the world has to offer?
Thomas
DeBee.
Okay, it's kind of a good. It's a half good question, Thomas. Half of the question is sort of. I feel like we're not really talking about the 100-point scale anymore. I feel like I think we've gotten just past that. I could be wrong.
10-point scale now.
Yeah. Wine criticism. Hopefully wine criticism is going away. But what I hope it is doing is becoming more honest. Like we talked earlier about telling the truth about what's happening in the glass. And I hope, and I think this is happening, is that it's less about giving wine a number and more about a dialogue about the actual winemaking, being honest. The wines need to be honest. They need to tell the truth, and you as a critic need to tell the truth about the wine. So I don't really know if this is answering his question, but I think what is happening is we're not giving numbers to wines anymore. We're really we're getting past that, and we're having a dialogue about the wine itself and how it's made. And I think that's going to be a really good thing for the wine and a really good thing for consumers. Because our consumers know, they don't need to be told what to drink anymore, I don't think.
Well, and your selection of your wines for your list are the wines that you approve
You
of
believe in.
that spot.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you don't need to score them. They're all
right,
good enough to be
exactly.
on the list.
Right.
In fact,
whether you're a journalist or a sommelier, it's about selling and writing about wines that you believe in.
Right. And we came up with a scale to reflect this, actually. It's the Gregory Condis Wines 1-point scale. 1 point, wine is good. No points, not good. That's really all you need to know.
Yeah.
And you can extrapolate that into 1 point, buy it. 0 points, don't buy it.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it all comes down to that. And, you know, whether it's 94 or 96, who cares?
I agree with that. And I buy wine for my list, and it's a lot of intuition. Like, it's just, you either feel it. It's generic. You can describe it, you can break it down, but like for me, there has to be some kind of like soul in the wine. Yeah,
I think it's aesthetics too. You look at your list as a collection of things, and does it fit?
Yeah, I mean, my wine list is my creative body of work right now. Like, you asked me if I'm writing anything right now. Not really, but I'm writing 2 wine lists, so that's, that's
absolutely.
Good.
You know, the chefs always get on your case. So, well, you don't make any wine. Well, I'm a curator here.
Yeah.
And the collection is the work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I understand the controversy about the point scale, and I think I agree with you that we ought to be talking more about the wine than the scale. On the other side of the coin, do you have an opinion whether or not the scale gives some guidance to people who aren't as knowledgeable about wine when they're in, let's say, a wine shop, and there's a card underneath the wine that says Wine Spectator or Parker or somebody gave it a certain score? Does that help the average buyer to sort of judge what's good and bad in wine?
I mean, any information helps the buyer, I guess.
Yeah.
There is a lot of bad wine in the world, and I think our goal as professionals is to get people to not drink that anymore and trade up and take a chance on something that is good, that's made honestly, that doesn't have a lot of crap in it. And like for me, purity in wine is like important.
I mean, one of the things that frustrates me is a wine gets a big score and the price does. It may not be it may be a great wine, or it may not be a great wine because it's dependent upon your palate, whether or not that, and so suddenly we've got these wines going out of the stratosphere where most people aren't going to be able to afford a $450, $500, $600 bottle of wine because they got these scores. So I think from that perspective, it's wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's all overrated. But then again, I wonder about the everyday guy and gal who's going through the wine shop and sees that card. So it's, that gives me an idea that at least somebody's tasted it.
Yeah, I used to get guests that would say, well, I only want 95 plus wines or something. And I'm like, well, if you only drink 97-point wines, the only thing you're going to know is what a 97-point wine tastes like. That's which, true. According to most critics, is usually going to be lots of extraction and lots of oak and no sense of place or any of the kind of geeky stuff that we get excited about. And I think that's why Somms clash with critics is we like the story, we like the magic behind it, the process, the people, and all that stuff. Versus when you blind taste a wine and you taste 50 wines, and the ones that jump out are the ones that are the flashiest, the sweetest, and that's the wines with the big scores. So I would love to see calibration saying that this wine is great for what it is. Is it the greatest bottle of Chardonnay in the world? Maybe not, but it's really good at what it does. And I think the perspective is important, and that's something you lose with scores. If you're just looking for a number,
the process is important.
Yeah, you don't get the context of what the wine is about.
Yeah.
You could taste first growth Bordeaux's and be like, well, these aren't that great because you don't know what they are. But they're going to be 20 years from now. So we lost our.
Do we have another one?
Yes, we do have another question. And it leads into this. Dead Dash Media, which I'm guessing is probably Dead Tree Media. What is the biggest challenge to creating a new kind of criticism?
Who's asking?
Dead Dash Media.
Okay. I don't know that person.
No, we actually don't. A viewer that we don't know.
Repeat the question.
What is the biggest challenge to creating a new kind of criticism? So different than what we were talking about.
No, so criticism, that's an interesting word, but I think it should be more like investigation. I think that it needs to be less wine criticism and more wine investigation. And I think, like I said before, like understanding why a wine is the way it is and where it came from and who made it and how it was made. And is it honest? Is it a true wine? Is it, was it made with someone's soul, and versus just, is it just a beverage? And so I'm more interested in wine journalism than in wine criticism.
Yeah, capture that magic that's in the bottle.
Well, and it needs to be reporting, right? And so, like, if you're a reporter and you report on, I don't know, pick something, the financial industry, right? You're very critical of the financial industry because you're the reporter. So you're the one who has to tell the truth about what's happening in that industry. And I think in American wine media, we're not being reporters enough. We're not, you know, like I said, you got to call out your winemakers, you got to call out the industry, you have to tell the truth. And that, to me, is more of a future that's interesting than criticism, you know, critiquing wines. I think it's more about investigating everything that's happening in the industry in order to improve it, you know, in order to make it better, you know.
So let me rephrase this question and what I think maybe he's getting to for you. If you were going to be the new arbiter of all things wine, Courtney Humiston, the new Robert Parker, the new, you know.
No, thank you.
Well, just to say, if you were going to reinvent it from scratch, what would you do and what would you value? What would be different?
You rephrase the question, but I don't think I would answer it any differently. That is what I would do. I would tell the truth about the wine. I would
you use
do
scores?
Investigative journalism. Would I score wine? I mean, I'd probably have to, like, if we're speaking honestly.
No,
and
you're
I was
starting
given
from
that
scratch. You can
position.
create it from...
Scores can be very helpful, you know, and we were talking about Wine and Spirits magazine earlier, and they do a really good job because it's kind of committee-based, and it's sort of yes and no, and then at some point the wine gets a score. So, yeah, I guess I would. I mean, I think you'd have to. But I would look, you know, you have to look at it, like, is this, I don't know. It's such a difficult question for me to answer, because it's just, wine for me is, like, so complex, and it's just, it would be very difficult for me to have to assign numbers to things.
Well, I think about when you
And I also don't really like numbers, so maybe I'd do, like, stars or something.
yeah, puffs or right, you know, glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I still like the 1-point scale, but that's the future, I think.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. It's a fair question.
I do like the idea of integrating some sort of a calibration, saying, okay, this is what this style is trying to be, and how well do they do what they're trying to accomplish? I mean, no?
Ish. I don't
Not
know.
so much?
Like, I don't approve of all styles of wine because I don't think that all styles of wine are acceptable. Like, I don't believe in wines that are, like, you know, made artificially and have a lot of additives and.
But what about somebody who just wants a blueberry milkshake, and you say, this is a really good blueberry milkshake?
I guess.
There are people that want it. You gotta, you know, sometimes
Then
you
you
gotta...
should have a blueberry milkshake, which sounds amazing.
with a shot of vodka in it, or some, you know, some Baileys
Which
or something.
sounds delicious, but not what I want in a glass of wine.
But, you know, I think there are people that want that. I mean...
Probably. There's people that want a lot of things. I don't know.
Yeah, I was never a huge fan of Petit Syrah, but I always had one on my list.
Yeah, no, Petit Syrah is interesting, and you know, and you have to have an open mind. Like, that is really important, because I used to be, like, so closed off to, like, Petit Syrah, you know, and then, like, you know, I tasted the Ridge Petit Syrah, and, you know, it didn't have those super chalky tannins, and it was a really good wine, and so you have to always have an open mind, for sure.
Yeah, and realize it's not about you; it's about the guests. That's a big thing to me as well. Even though, okay, we like to say that.
That's something you're supposed to say, for sure.
I do believe it to an extent, you know. It's interesting because there's famous somms out there that are like, you come and drink my wine. And then there's other somms that are just successful, are like, hey, it's not about me, it's about the guests. And there's different ways to do it that are both successful.
Yeah.
You just got to find that middle ground that works for you.
Yeah,
and
you
you got to have some
challenge
chops
people
if you're going to
to
go
see.
out there and say, sorry, we're drinking my wine. You know.
It's not about my wine, though. It's about the wine that the winemaker made that you bought for them to.
You got to do it with the sparkle in your eye somehow, and make it palatable, because you're going to
lot
turn
of
off a lot of
smiling.
people. Yeah, exactly. Not a lot of people can pull that off. I bet you could, though.
Maybe.
We got any more? Or are we
We're good?
wrapping it up? Okay.
Good.
We're almost out of Burgundy anyway, so.
Right, exactly.
All right.
Cheers.
Bonus round.
Okay, bonus round.